The massive Xorelian ship hung in the sky above Seoul like a dark cloud. It stretched for miles, blocking the sun and casting shadows across the bustling city. People in the streets stopped and stared up at the alien vessel. Some ran in fear. Others took pictures with their phones. The military had already formed a perimeter around major government buildings, but they looked small and weak compared to the giant ship above. Inside the emergency command center deep beneath the Blue House, President Kim stood silently at the window. His face showed no emotion, but his knuckles turned white as he gripped his hands behind his back. The room was filled with military officers, government officials, and scientists, all waiting for his response. "What do they want?" President Kim finally asked, his voice steady despite the tension. Director Park, head of National Intelligence, walked forward with purpose. Her movements were precise, controlled. She placed a tablet on the table and slid it toward the president. "They sent this message 30 minutes ago, sir," she said. "They're demanding 30% of Earth's resources as tribute. Water, minerals, rare metals, biological samples. They call it a protection fee. They've given us 7 days to comply." President Kim picked up the tablet and read the message carefully. The room remained silent. The only sound was the quiet hum of computers and the distant noise of military helicopters outside. "And if we refuse?" he asked, looking up at Director Park. She met his gaze directly. "They didn't elaborate, sir." The threat was clear even without details. The Xorelian ship carried weapons beyond human understanding. Scans showed energy readings that defied Earth's physics. One demonstration of their power had vaporized an uninhabited island in the Pacific. "Just a warning shot," they had said. President Kim set the tablet down and walked to the large screen showing a live feed of the ship. Other alien vessels had positioned themselves over major cities around the world: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow. The coordinated global approach suggested the aliens had studied Earth carefully before arriving. "Have other nations received the same demand?" he asked. General Ryu, the highest-ranking military officer present, nodded. "Yes, sir. We're in contact with the UN Security Council. Every country has received identical terms." "Options?" President Kim asked. "Militarily, we have none," General Ryu admitted. "Our weapons would be like throwing stones at a battleship." Dr. Jin, the chief scientist, spoke up. "We need time, sir. Their technology is advanced, but not incomprehensible. If we can analyze their systems, maybe find a weakness." "We don't have time," Director Park interrupted. 7 days is not enough to understand their technology." President Kim remained silent for a moment. Then his jaw tightened with resolve. "Contact Admiral Lee. Tell her to activate Protocol Omega." The room went still. Protocol Omega was a last resort plan developed after years of theoretical planning for alien contact. It had never been meant for actual implementation. "Sir," General Ryu said carefully, "Protocol Omega assumes global cooperation. It would require immediate sharing of all military and scientific resources among nations that don't trust each other." "Then make them trust each other," President Kim said firmly. "The Xorelians gave us 7 days. We'll use every minute. Tell Admiral Lee she has full authority, all resources, all personnel, whatever she needs." "Yes, sir," General Ryu said, immediately reaching for his secure phone. High above Earth, Lord Traz, ambassador of the Xorelian Empire, returned to his ship after delivering the message to Earth's leaders. His scaled skin shimmered under the lights of the command deck as he approached Supreme Commander Vorex. "The message has been delivered," Traz reported, bowing slightly. As expected, the humans appeared shocked and afraid. Commander Vorex turned from the viewing screen showing Earth below. "Did they respond?" "Not yet," Traz said with a smile that revealed sharp teeth. "They will need time to accept their situation. No doubt they are arguing among themselves even now." "The scan results are interesting," Vorex said, gesturing to the data displays. These humans are more advanced than our initial reports suggested. They've progressed quickly for such a young species. But still no match for us, Traz pointed out. Their most powerful weapons couldn't penetrate even our basic shields, and they're divided into nearly 200 separate political entities. They'll never unite in time. Vorex nodded. The Galactic Council was wise to select this planet. The resources here will fuel our expansion for decades, and the humans will make excellent workers once they understand their place. They will negotiate, as all lesser species do, Traz said confidently. Their silence is merely fear. Then they will surrender, and Earth will become another productive colony of the Empire. Continue monitoring their communications, Vorex ordered. Report any organized resistance immediately, though I don't expect any. Traz bowed again and left the command deck. He had conquered 12 worlds for the Empire. This would be his 13th. The humans would be like all the others, scared, divided, and ultimately submissive. Back on Earth, Admiral Lee received the call while aboard her flagship in the Pacific. At 53, she had spent her life preparing for wars that never came. Until now. Protocol Omega, confirmed, she said after listening to General Ryu. I'm activating all cells immediately. She ended the call and turned to her executive officer, Commander Sung. It's happening, she said simply. Commander Sung's eyes widened. Protocol Omega, they're really here. Admiral Lee nodded. Above Seoul and other major cities, they want tribute, 30% of Earth's resources. What do we have that they could possibly need? Sung asked. Everything, Lee replied. Water, minerals, biological diversity. Earth is a treasure trove, and they want us to hand it over without a fight. She walked to the command center of the ship and pressed her palm against a scanner. A hidden panel opened, revealing a special terminal. Lee typed a complex code and pressed her thumb against another scanner. This activates sleeper agents in every major research facility worldwide, she explained. Scientists, engineers, military strategists. People who were briefed on this possibility and have been preparing in secret for years. Will it be enough? Sung asked. It has to be, Lee said. Send the coded message to all Protocol Omega participants. The storm has arrived. Prepare to fight. Across the globe, thousands of individuals received the message. In laboratories, universities, military bases, and government facilities, they began their work. Some gathered data on the alien ships. Others started adapting existing weapons. The most important groups began analyzing the limited information available about Xorelian technology. In Seoul, President Kim addressed his nation. He spoke calmly, urging people to remain in their homes and trust in their government. He didn't mention submission or resistance. He simply asked for patience. Similar messages came from leaders around the world. To the Xorelians watching from above, it seemed like Earth was paralyzed with indecision and fear. They detected no major military movements, no significant increase in weapon production. But beneath the surface, humanity was preparing. The Xorelians had made a critical mistake. They had judged humans by the standards of other conquered species. They expected negotiation. They expected eventual surrender. Lord Traz returned to his quarters aboard the flagship, pleased with the day's work. He composed his report to the Galactic Council. Earth will be ours within the week. The humans will negotiate, as all lesser species do. He couldn't have been more wrong. 3 days had passed since the Xorelian ultimatum. In a secret underground facility beneath Jeju Island, Dr. Choi stared at the data streaming across multiple screens. His team had been working without rest, analyzing every bit of information they could gather about the alien ships. The room smelled of coffee and sweat. Empty food containers piled up in corners. Dr. Choi ran his hand through his messy hair and squinted at a particular pattern emerging in the data. He adjusted his glasses and leaned closer. There, he whispered, then louder, there, I see it now. His assistant, Dr. Moon, hurried over. What did you find? Instead of answering, Dr. Choi typed rapidly, entering new parameters into the simulation. The large central screen displayed a model of the Sorelian shield system. It pulsed with blue energy that shifted and morphed in regular patterns. "Watch," Dr. Choi said, pointing to the simulation. "The shield frequencies shift every 82 seconds. But look here." He zoomed in on a particular section. During the transition, there's a vulnerability. The simulation showed a brief flicker in the shield as it changed patterns. 3 seconds, Dr. Choi said. For 3 seconds during each transition, the shield is weaker, not completely down, but penetrable with the right weapon. Dr. Moon stared at the screen. "Are you certain? We can't afford to be wrong." "I've run the analysis 17 times, Dr. Choi said. "The pattern is consistent." Dr. Moon immediately reached for the secure phone. "We need to contact Admiral Lee." Within 2 hours, Admiral Lee arrived at the facility. Despite having barely slept since the aliens appeared, she looked alert and focused. She strode into the lab with purpose, flanked by 2 senior officers. "Show me," she said without preamble. Dr. Choi ran the simulation again, explaining his findings in detail. "The shields operate on a rotating frequency to prevent our weapons from adapting. But the transition between frequencies creates a brief window of vulnerability." Admiral Lee nodded, studying the data carefully. "Can we exploit it?" "We believe so," Dr. Choi replied. "But we'll need global coordination. The window is too short for random attacks. We would need to hit all Sorelian ships simultaneously during that precise 3-second window." "And what kind of weapons would be effective?" Admiral Lee asked. Dr. Choi pulled up another simulation. "Based on our analysis, concentrated electromagnetic pulse weapons might work. Not our standard military EMPs. They're too weak. But if we combine our technology with what we've learned from studying their ships, we might be able to create something strong enough." Admiral Lee was silent for a moment, processing the information. "How long to develop these weapons?" "With normal procedures, years," Dr. Choi admitted. "But under Protocol Omega, with global resources, maybe 3 days." Admiral Lee's expression remained neutral, but her eyes showed a glimmer of hope. "Begin immediately. I'll coordinate with other nations." As Admiral Lee left the facility, she contacted the Global Command Center established under Protocol Omega. Leaders from major nations were connected via secure channels. "We have a potential weakness," she reported. "But exploiting it will require complete cooperation. Every nation with advanced technology must share everything. Military secrets, research breakthroughs, experimental weapons." On screens around her, faces of world leaders showed mixed reactions. The Russian president frowned. The Chinese premier looked skeptical. "Trust has never been our strong suit," the British prime minister said dryly. "This isn't about trust," Admiral Lee replied. "It's about survival. The Sorelians won't stop with 30% of our resources. Study their patterns across the galaxy. Every world that surrendered was eventually stripped bare." She shared intelligence gathered by analysts who had studied Sorelian communications. Images appeared showing other worlds, once thriving planets now reduced to mining operations. Silence followed. Then, one by one, the leaders nodded their agreement. "Whatever you need," the American president said finally. In bunkers across the planet, humanity prepared. Research facilities from Seoul to Stockholm worked on the EMP technology. Military bases from Beijing to Buenos Aires prepared deployment strategies. Intelligence agencies shared information freely for perhaps the first time in history. Old enemies became allies overnight. Resources were pooled. Scientists who had once competed now collaborated. The greatest minds on Earth focused on a single goal: survival. At a military base near Busan, Captain Kang oversaw the retrofitting of commercial satellites into weapons platforms. His team worked tirelessly, converting communication equipment into delivery systems for the new EMP weapons. "Will this really work?" asked Lieutenant Jun, his second in command. Captain Kang looked up from the satellite component he was modifying. "It has to. He pointed to a radar screen showing the Xorelian vessels in orbit. They're watching us, monitoring our communications, scanning for weapons, but they're not seeing what's really happening. What do you mean? Lieutenant Jun asked. They think we're preparing for surrender, Captain Kang told his team as they gathered around. Our official channels are filled with discussions about the tribute demands. Our visible military forces haven't moved significantly. Let them think that. His team nodded, understanding the strategy. The Xorelians believe they know us, Captain Kang continued. They think we're predictable. That's their mistake. They've never faced humans before. Meanwhile, aboard the Xorelian flagship, Lord Traz prepared his daily report to Supreme Commander Vorex. He reviewed the surveillance data with satisfaction. Human military movements were minimal. Official communications indicated heated debates about which resources to surrender. Several nations appeared to be arguing over their percentage of the tribute. Lord Traz entered the command deck and bowed to Commander Vorex. The situation continues as predicted, he reported. Human leaders are discussing surrender terms. Their military forces remain in defensive positions only. Commander Vorex nodded, pleased. Any signs of resistance? Nothing significant, Traz replied. Some small military movements, but nothing coordinated. They seem to be protecting their own territories from each other more than preparing to fight us. He projected images showing minimal activity around major military bases. What the Xorelians couldn't detect were the underground facilities where the real work was happening. They are behaving exactly as the Conquest Manual predicts, Traz continued. Initial shock, followed by disorganized panic, then acceptance of inevitable defeat. Excellent, Vorex said. Prepare the collection vessels. When they surrender, I want to begin resource extraction immediately. Yes, Commander, Traz said with another bow. Shall I prepare a formal acceptance of their surrender? Yes, Vorex replied. Make it appropriately grand. These humans should understand the honor of joining the Empire. As Traz left to compose the document, he felt a surge of pride. Another successful conquest for his record. The humans were so predictable, so weak. But deep beneath the surface of Earth, Dr. Choi's team had completed the prototype EMP weapon. Admiral Lee watched as they ran the final test. The device pulsed with energy, targeting a small shield generator built using reverse-engineered Xorelian technology. The test shield flickered and failed. It works, Dr. Choi said, his voice showing exhaustion and excitement. If we time it precisely during the 3-second vulnerability window, it will work against their ships. Admiral Lee allowed herself a small smile. Begin mass production immediately, and make sure nothing reaches their scanners. Across the globe, hidden facilities began manufacturing the weapons. Captain Kang's satellite platforms were nearly ready. Underground missile installations were modified to carry the new EMP devices. 6 days had passed. The Xorelian deadline approached. On the surface, Earth appeared to be preparing for surrender. But beneath that appearance, humanity was arming itself for a fight unlike any in history. The Xorelians expected negotiation. They would get war instead. As the final hours ticked down, Admiral Lee addressed the combined forces of Earth. Her face appeared on screens in hidden command centers worldwide. Tomorrow, we show the Xorelians what humans are truly capable of, she said. They think we're predictable. They think we're weak. They're wrong. The morning of the deadline arrived with clear skies. The chosen meeting place was an open field outside Seoul, far enough from the city to prevent immediate danger to civilians. Military vehicles surrounded the area, but kept a respectful distance as ordered by the Xorelians. Admiral Lee stood alone in the center of the field. She wore her full dress uniform, medals gleaming in the morning sun. Her posture was perfect, betraying none of the tension she felt. In her ear, a tiny communications device kept her connected to command centers around the world. All units in position, came the whispered confirmation from General Ryu. Waiting for your signal. Admiral Lee gave no visible response. Her eyes remained fixed on the sky, where the massive Sorelian flagship hovered. A small shuttle detached from its underside and began descending toward the field. The shuttle was sleek and silver, making almost no sound as it landed smoothly on the grass 30 meters from where Admiral Lee stood. The door slid open, revealing Lord Traz and 4 Sorelian guards. They were tall beings with scaled skin that shimmered with iridescent colors. Their eyes were large and yellow with vertical pupils. Lord Traz stepped forward with confident strides. His ornate armor marked him as a high-ranking official. The guards followed, carrying weapons that resembled advanced rifles. "Admiral Lee," Lord Traz said, his translator converting his clicking speech into Korean. "I am pleased you have come alone as requested." "As your message instructed," Admiral Lee replied calmly. Lord Traz circled her slowly, examining her uniform. "I understand you speak for Earth now. Your governments have finally united under pressure. I represent Earth's response to your demand," Admiral Lee said. "And that response is?" Lord Traz prompted, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. Admiral Lee met his gaze directly. "We accept your terms." Lord Traz's smile widened, revealing sharp teeth. "Wise decision. The Empire rewards compliance. Your tribute will be collected efficiently, with minimal disruption to your major population centers. However," Lee continued, her voice steady, "we have a counteroffer." Lord Traz tilted his head, curious rather than concerned. "A counteroffer? That is unexpected. What could you possibly offer the Empire?" Admiral Lee checked her watch casually. "In exactly 20 seconds, I suggest you look up at your ships." Lord Traz's expression changed from amusement to confusion. "What trick is this?" "Not a trick. A demonstration." Lord Traz started to signal his guards, but Admiral Lee's calm confidence made him hesitate. Instead, he looked up at his fleet as she suggested. At precisely 10:00 a.m. local time, Admiral Lee pressed a small button on her wrist device. The signal went out. Across the globe, EMP weapons fired simultaneously from hidden locations. In orbit, Sorelian ships suddenly lost power as their shields failed during the critical 3-second window. The precisely timed attack caught them at their most vulnerable moment, exactly 82 seconds into their shield cycle. The effect was immediate and devastating. The flagship's lights flickered. Smaller vessels drifted out of formation. Emergency systems activated, casting red glows from portholes. Lord Traz stared in shock at the sight. "What have you done?" he demanded, his translator failing to hide the panic in his voice. Before Admiral Lee could answer, the second phase began. From hidden hangars, Earth's fighter squadrons launched. They had been redesigned and retrofitted with technology developed in the past week, a blend of human innovation and reverse-engineered Sorelian systems. Lieutenant Yoon led the first fighter squadron against the crippled alien flagship. Her 12 fighters streaked into the sky, climbing rapidly toward the vulnerable target. "All units, maintain formation," she ordered over the secure channel. "Remember your training. Hit the marked weak points only." As they approached the flagship, Lieutenant Yoon could see the damage the EMP had caused. The massive ship's defensive weapons were offline. Its engines struggled to maintain position. For Earth, she transmitted as her squadron reached attack position and unleashed their payload. The specially designed missiles struck with precision, targeting the ship's propulsion system. They weren't trying to destroy the flagship, just disable it. Below in the field, Lord Traz watched in horror as explosions bloomed along his flagship's hull. He turned to Admiral Lee, rage distorting his features. "You deceptive creatures, you pretended to surrender." "We never surrendered," Admiral Lee corrected him. "I said we accepted your terms, which were to give our response today. This is our response." She gestured to the sky where human fighters now engaged Sorelian vessels around the world. "Humanity does not surrender. Not to threats, not to bullies, and certainly not to invaders." Lord Traz reached for his weapon. "You will die for this." Before he could fire, Hidden snipers took out the 4 Xorelian guards with precise shots. Lord Traz froze, suddenly alone and surrounded. "I wouldn't," Admiral Lee advised him calmly. "You're more valuable alive." In orbit, the battle continued. The Xorelian ships had begun to recover from the initial EMP strike, but they faced a coordinated attack they hadn't prepared for. Human fighters darted between the larger vessels, targeting engines and weapon systems. Lieutenant Yoon's squadron had already disabled 2 smaller Xorelian ships and returned to the flagship. Its shields were beginning to regenerate. "Second window approaching," her tactical officer reported. "EMP charging. All units prepare for second strike," Lieutenant Yoon ordered. Exactly 82 seconds after the first EMP, a second wave hit. The flagship's recovering shields collapsed again. Lieutenant Yoon's squadron fired their remaining missiles at the ship's command deck. "Direct hit," her tactical officer confirmed. The flagship began to list to one side, its stabilizers failing. Emergency pods ejected from its hull as crew members abandoned ship. Similar scenes played out around the world. The Xorelian fleet, caught completely by surprise, struggled to mount an effective defense. Their technology was superior, but they had never faced an enemy who had studied their weaknesses so thoroughly. Back on the ground, Admiral Lee watched the battle with Lord Traz as her prisoner. "Your arrogance blinded you," she told him. "You thought we would negotiate because that's what your other victims did. You never considered that humans might be different." Lord Traz stared at the sky in disbelief. "How? Your technology is primitive. Your world is divided." "Was divided," Admiral Lee corrected. "Nothing unites humans like a common enemy. As for our technology, we learn quickly, especially when motivated." Reports flooded in from around the world. The coordinated EMP strikes had worked exactly as planned. Xorelian ships were retreating from Earth orbit, regrouping at a distance. Supreme Commander Vorex, from a secondary command ship, sent an emergency message to all Xorelian vessels. "Disengage and retreat to Rally Point Alpha. This planet is more dangerous than expected." Lieutenant Yoon received the order to hold position as the Xorelian ships began their retreat. Her fighters formed a protective screen around Earth as the aliens withdrew. "Should we pursue?" she asked command. "Negative," came Admiral Lee's response. "Let them go. They need to carry our message back to their empire." As the Xorelian fleet limped away from Earth, Admiral Lee turned to Lord Traz. "Now, Ambassador, let's discuss those new terms I mentioned." Lord Traz, watching his mighty fleet retreat, could only stare in stunned silence. The Xorelians had never faced such resistance. They had conquered 12 worlds before Earth, and none had fought back so effectively. Their intelligence on humans had been catastrophically wrong. These weren't primitive, divided creatures that could be easily subjugated. These were dangerous, resourceful beings who had turned the Empire's own technology against it. As their ships retreated to a safe distance, Supreme Commander Vorex faced an uncomfortable truth. They had seriously underestimated humanity. The easy conquest he had promised the Empire had turned into an embarrassing defeat. And back on Earth, humanity celebrated its first victory against the stars, knowing that the war had only just begun. 2 weeks after Earth's surprising victory, the second wave of Xorelian ships arrived. This was no small force like before. This was the full might of the Xorelian Empire, hundreds of massive warships that darkened the skies over every continent. They came without warnings or demands. The first attack struck New York. A beam of intense energy cut through the city's tallest buildings like they were paper. Tokyo fell next, then London. Major cities around the world burned as Xorelian ships targeted population centers without mercy. From a hidden command center in rural California, President Kim watched the destruction on screens that showed live feeds from around the world. His face was grim as casualty reports poured in. "Millions dead already," Director Park reported, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "And we're only 3 hours into the attack. Where is Admiral Lee?" President Kim asked. Safe in the bunker beneath Mount Hala, General Ryu answered. The Xorelians haven't found it yet. And our countermeasures? General Ryu shook his head. Our EMP weapons are less effective. They've modified their shields after the first battle. We can still penetrate them, but the damage is minimal. President Kim stared at the screens showing burning cities. Connect me to Admiral Lee. Deep beneath Mount Hala on Jeju Island, Admiral Lee received the call in the hardened bunker that served as Earth's main military command center. The facility had been built years before as a refuge against nuclear war. Now it protected Earth's leaders from alien weapons. Mr. President, Admiral Lee acknowledged as his face appeared on her screen. The situation is dire, President Kim said without preamble. They're targeting civilians to force our surrender. Admiral Lee nodded grimly. They're angry. We embarrassed them. This is retaliation, but also a tactical move. They want to break our will to fight. Is it working? The President asked quietly. No, sir. Admiral Lee replied firmly. We anticipated this response. It's brutal, but predictable. She pulled up a strategic display showing Earth and the positions of Xorelian ships. They're focusing on causing maximum damage with minimum risk to their fleet. They're staying high in orbit, out of range of our most effective weapons. Can we stop them? Not immediately, Admiral Lee admitted, but we have a plan. We've been developing Operation Dragon since our first victory. What does it entail? Admiral Lee's eyes showed determination. We take the fight to them. We already have a network of orbital platforms almost ready, civilian space stations, satellites, and our own military spacecraft have been retrofitted with weapons based on Xorelian technology. Will it be enough? President Kim asked. It has to be, Admiral Lee said simply. After the call ended, Admiral Lee gathered her command staff. Despite the grim news from around the world, her voice remained steady. Launch Operation Dragon, she ordered. All units, prepare for orbital engagement. Commander Han, who had been overseeing the orbital defense network, stood at attention. We're ready, Admiral. The network is at 80% completion. Not ideal, but functional. It will have to do, Admiral Lee said. Begin deployment immediately. Throughout the next 12 hours, as Xorelian ships continued their bombardment of Earth's cities, a new force rose to meet them. From hidden facilities around the world, spacecraft launched into orbit. Some were military vessels that had been modified with new weapons. Others were civilian craft, space station modules, research vessels, even private space tourism ships, now armed and ready for war. Commander Han led the orbital defense network from his command ship, a former space station module now bristling with weapons. All units report in, he ordered as his cobbled-together fleet took position in Earth orbit. One by one, the captains of Earth's impromptu navy acknowledged his command. It was a strange fleet, mismatched vessels from dozens of nations, united by desperation and courage. Begin attack pattern Alpha, Commander Han ordered. Remember your training. Hit and retreat. Don't stay in their firing solution. Earth's fleet engaged the Xorelian warships with surprising effectiveness. The smaller human vessels darted between the massive alien ships, firing weapons developed from studying Xorelian technology. They couldn't match the aliens' firepower, but they were nimble and unpredictable. In his laboratory beneath Mount Hala, Dr. Choi monitored the battle through data feeds. His team analyzed every exchange of fire, every hit and miss, searching for patterns. They're adapting to our technology, Dr. Choi warned, calling Admiral Lee directly. The shield vulnerability we exploited is already smaller, down to 2.1 seconds from 3. And they're randomizing the cycle timing. Admiral Lee frowned. How long until our weapons are ineffective? At this rate, maybe 48 hours, Dr. Choi replied. Admiral Lee relayed this information to Commander Han in orbit. Then we'll adapt faster, Han replied without hesitation. He turned to his weapons officer. modify our firing patterns, randomize our approach vectors. They're learning from us, but we can learn from them too. The battle for Earth's orbit intensified. Sorelian ships, confident in their superior technology, had not expected such fierce resistance. Their initial strategy of bombarding cities from a safe distance was disrupted as they were forced to defend against the swarming human vessels. For every human ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Earth had committed everything to this fight. Every spacecraft, every weapon, every trained pilot. On the 3rd day of battle, Dr. Choi made a breakthrough. By analyzing the Sorelian communications his team had intercepted, he identified a fundamental flaw in their tactical algorithms. They relied too heavily on centralized command. He explained to Admiral Lee, "All battle orders come from their flagship. If we can disrupt that communication, then their fleet loses coordination," Admiral Lee finished. "Can we exploit this?" "Yes," Dr. Choi said. "We've developed a targeted communication jamming system based on their own technology, but we need to get close to their command ship to deploy it." Admiral Lee immediately contacted Commander Han. "We have a new priority target." The plan was simple but dangerous. A small strike team would approach the Sorelian command ship under cover of a larger attack. While the main fleet distracted the Sorelians, the strike team would deploy Dr. Choi's jamming device. Lieutenant Yoon volunteered to lead the mission. Her fighter had been upgraded with the best stealth technology Earth could produce. "This is a one-way trip," Commander Han warned her. Lieutenant Yoon nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir." For Earth. The attack began at dawn on the 4th day. Earth's fleet launched a full-scale assault against the Sorelian line. As the battle raged, Lieutenant Yoon's small team approached the massive Sorelian command ship from below, using the planet's magnetic field to mask their signature. Approaching target, Lieutenant Yoon reported, "No sign they've detected us." Her team reached the command ship and attached the jamming device to its hull. As soon as it activated, they retreated at maximum speed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Sorelian fleet's coordinated attacks faltered. Ships began moving independently, some continuing to fight while others fell back in confusion. Commander Han seized the opportunity. "All units, concentrate fire on designated targets. Hit them while they're disorganized." Earth's fleet attacked with renewed vigor. Sorelian ships, unable to coordinate their defenses, fell one by one. Some attempted to retreat, only to be pursued by faster human vessels. By the end of the day, the Sorelian fleet was in tatters. More than half their ships had been destroyed or disabled. The rest retreated to the far side of the moon, out of range of Earth's weapons. On his command ship, Supreme Overlord Draz raged at his officers. The communication system had been restored, but the damage was done. "How could this happen?" he demanded. "They are primitives. We have conquered 100 worlds more advanced than this." His executive officer, Commander Sorix, stepped forward. "Supreme Overlord, we must consider withdrawal. We have lost too many ships. This conquest is costing more than the planet is worth." "Withdrawal," Draz hissed. "The Empire does not withdraw. The Empire conquers. The Empire has never faced humans before," another officer dared to say. "They are different." Murmurs of agreement spread among the officers. What had begun as a simple conquest mission had become a catastrophe. Nearly half the Imperial fleet destroyed by a species that barely had spaceflight technology when they arrived. Draz saw the rebellion growing in his officers' eyes. The simple conquest he had promised was now threatening his position in the Empire. If he returned home defeated, his fate would be worse than death. "Prepare the remaining ships," he ordered. "We will make one final attack with everything we have." His officers exchanged worried glances. They had seen what humans could do, and now they feared their own leader's desperation more than the enemy. 6 months after Earth's successful defense against the Sorelian fleet, Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of the TSS Defiance. The ship hummed with power around her. It was humanity's greatest achievement, Earth's first faster-than-light vessel, Built by combining human ingenuity with captured Sorelian technology, the ship's sleek design reflected its hybrid origins. Sorelian engine technology powered systems designed by human engineers. The weapons were based on alien principles, but modified by Earth scientists to be more effective. The crew was the best Earth had to offer, veterans of the orbital defense who had proven themselves in the battle for their planet. Admiral Lee walked slowly around the command center, inspecting each station. The crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring systems that would have seemed like magic just a year ago. Status report, Admiral Lee requested as she took her position in the command chair. Captain Shin, her executive officer, stepped forward. All systems operational. Admiral, FTL drive is stable. Weapons and shields at full capacity. We're ready for the jump. Admiral Lee nodded. And the fleet? The other 5 ships report ready as well, Captain Shin replied. They're in formation and awaiting your command. Admiral Lee looked at the main view screen. Outside the Defiance, 5 smaller vessels waited. They weren't as advanced as the flagship, but each carried the same revolutionary FTL drive. Together, they formed humanity's first interstellar strike force. Communications, send the message to Earth Command, Admiral Lee ordered. Operation Starbreak is commencing. She turned to the navigation officer. Set course for the Sorelian supply depot at Proxima Centauri. Prepare for FTL jump. The navigation officer entered the coordinates. Course set, Admiral. FTL drive spooling up. Admiral Lee addressed the bridge crew. This is a historic moment. Humanity is about to travel beyond our solar system for the first time. But we go not as explorers, not yet. First, we must secure our freedom. She paused, looking at each crew member. The Sorelians have withdrawn to regroup, but they haven't given up. Intelligence shows they're gathering a larger force to return. We can't wait for them to bring the fight back to Earth. We must take the fight to them. FTL drive ready, Admiral, the engineering officer reported. Admiral Lee nodded. Execute jump. Space seemed to bend around the 6 ships. Then, in a flash of light that briefly outshone the sun, they vanished from Earth's solar system. The journey to Proxima Centauri took only hours instead of the years it would have required before. When the fleet emerged from FTL, they found themselves facing a massive Sorelian supply depot. It was a sprawling space station surrounded by cargo ships and a small defensive force. They're not expecting us, Captain Shin observed, studying the tactical display. No alert status. Minimal weapons powered. Target their supply routes, Admiral Lee ordered. Cut them off. Disable. Don't destroy unless necessary. We need those supplies. Before Vorex could answer, the throne room doors burst open. A guard rushed in, his scales pale with fear. Supreme Overlord, human ships have entered the system. They've bypassed all our defenses. Outside the palace, the TSS Defiance and 15 other human vessels, a fleet that had grown with each victory, appeared in orbit around the Sorelian throne world. They made no aggressive moves. They simply waited. A message was broadcast on all frequencies, in perfect Sorelian language. This is Admiral Lee of Earth. I am here to speak with Supreme Overlord Draz regarding terms of surrender. Yours, not ours. The Sorelian High Command was thrown into chaos. Some demanded immediate attack. Others advocated escape. Draz, seeing his authority crumbling, made a desperate decision. I will meet with this human, he declared. Prepare my shuttle. When Admiral Lee finally met Supreme Overlord Draz to dictate terms, he expected mercy. What he received was justice. They met on the Defiance, in a conference room designed to accommodate both species. Draz entered with arrogance, despite his circumstances. You have been fortunate, human, he said as he took his seat. But fortune changes. Admiral Lee's expression remained neutral. This isn't about fortune, Overlord Draz. This is about consequences. Your empire attacked my world without provocation. You killed millions of my people. There will be a reckoning. She placed a data tablet on the table. These are our terms. They are non-negotiable. Draz glanced at the tablet, then looked up with shock. These demands are impossible. You cannot expect. The Xorelian Empire will withdraw from Earth space immediately, Lee stated, cutting him off. You will acknowledge Earth's sovereignty and our right to defend ourselves. You will pay reparations for the lives lost. You will free all enslaved species in your empire. You destroy centuries of imperial rule. Draz hissed. Admiral Lee leaned forward. No, you did that when you attacked Earth. We're just finishing what you started. As news spread of humanity's victory, subjugated species across the galaxy looked to Earth with hope. What had begun as a desperate defense of one planet had become a movement for freedom throughout the sector. 3 months later, in the newly established Terran headquarters on Earth, Admiral Lee met with representatives from dozens of worlds. Some were former slaves freed by Colonel Bay's teams. Others were ambassadors from planets inspired to overthrow their Xorelian overlords. They gathered in a large chamber built specifically for interspecies meetings. The air was carefully controlled to accommodate various breathing requirements. Translation devices ensured all could understand each other. Admiral Lee addressed the assembled beings. 1 year ago, humanity didn't know we weren't alone in the universe. Today, we stand with you as allies against oppression. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each representative. We know what it means to fight for freedom, she told them. And now, we'll help you fight for yours. A blue-skinned Kelvar, now serving as ambassador for his liberated world, stood. The Xorelians thought humans would negotiate and surrender. They were wrong. The galaxy will never be the same, and we are grateful for it. The chamber erupted in sounds of agreement from dozens of species. The age of the Xorelian Empire was ending. The age of freedom, led by the most unexpected species in the galaxy, had begun.